The air hangs thick with the tang of fresh blood and sun-baked dust, a metallic bite that clings to your throat like a warning. Screams echo off the mud-brick walls of the Grand Plaza, not frantic bursts, but measured wails, timed to the rhythm of knives slicing deliberate paths. You stand at the edge of the crowd, pressed among the throng of wide-eyed nobles and trembling merchants, the ground beneath your feet slick with something warm. Before you rises a pillar, tall as 3 men stacked, its surface gleaming wet under the merciless Mesopotamian sun. But it's not stone. No, it's flesh strips of it, peeled and pinned, twitching faintly in the breeze. 4,000 voices, once queens of distant clans, now reduced to this, a living tapestry of terror, their bodies broken and claimed in the open heart of Nimrud. The king strides forward, his bronze-tipped boots leaving crimson prints, Ashurnasirpal. His eyes, cold as river pebbles, scan the assembly. This is no frenzy of battle, this is theater. And as the first layer peels away with a wet rip, the empire watches, breath held, knowing one truth. Rebellion dies not in the field, but here, in the skin of its fallen. But what sparked this machine of horror? And why did it bind an empire in fear for generations? What you're about to hear involves systematic torture and sexual violence against captives. These events are drawn from ancient inscriptions, etched by the perpetrators themselves. They are documented, yes, but raw and unrelenting. If this pulls you too close to the edge, step away, I'll hold no grudge. For those pressing on, we turn not to wallow in the wounds, but to dismantle the gears that turn them. This machine wasn't built in a day. It hummed with purpose. From that pillar of agony, pull back. See the river that birthed it all, the Tigris, wide and indifferent, carving through the cradle of empires. 9 centuries before the common dawn, in the shadow of ziggurats that scraped the gods' feet, Assyria stirred from a long slumber. Not a wild beast lashing out, as tales might whisper, but a ledger-keeper's dream, columns of tribute tallied, borders etched in blood and bronze. This was no tale of a mad tyrant lost to rage. This was accounting, precision carved into bone. Ashurnasirpal, 3rd king of what scholars now call the Neo-Assyrian bloom, didn't invent cruelty, he perfected it as policy. His realm stretched from the Zagros peaks to the salty lip of the Mediterranean, a web of vassal cities paying in grain, gold, and fealty. But beneath the gloss of conquest lay the rot. Heavy taxes that bent spines, forced marches that emptied villages, whispers of revolt bubbling like spring mud. One spark in the east, a cluster of rebel clans under a chieftain named Pethor, and the machine whirred to life. 4,000 souls, women of the rebellion, titled queens in their hilltop holds, dragged to Nimrud not for death alone, but for display. This wasn't vengeance, it was erasure, scripted to echo through every tavern and temple. Defy the center, and your very skin becomes the scroll of warning. Why does this chill us still? Because that plaza could be any stage where power parades its price. And in understanding the architect, we glimpse the blueprint still etched in our world. Long before the pillar rose, the machine's foundations were laid in the dust of Ashur, the old heart city where gods and kings bartered fates. Picture Assyria then, a riverine strip squeezed between jealous giants Babylon to the south with its priestly intrigues, the mountain tribes to the north gnawing at the edges like wolves on a flank. For generations, the empire had flickered, dimmed by invasions that left fields fallow and coffers bare. Adad-nirari, Ashurnasirpal's grandfather, had clawed back scraps of glory, forging treaties with Babylon and drilling armies into shape. His son, Tukulti-Ninurta Ashurnasirpal's father, pushed further, his campaigns a drumbeat of reclamation, valleys retaken, tribute caravans groaning under ivory and iron. By the time young Ashurnasirpal stepped from the temple shadows in 883 BCE, the throne room hummed with readiness. Armories brimmed with chariots oiled for war. Scribes tallied maps of forgotten frontiers. But readiness breeds expectation, and expectation, when unmet, forges blades. He wasn't born to this, with a tyrant's howl. No shadowed cradle tales of infant omens or poisoned milk. Ashurnasirpal entered the world around 910 BCE, a prince in a house of calculated risks. His early years blurred in the haze of royal drills. Mornings in the archery yards, arrows whispering through reeds to mimic enemy hearts. Afternoons bent over clay tablets, learning the cuneiform dance of decrees and tallies. Tukulti-Ninurta's court was a forge, not a nursery lessons in loyalty hammered home by the lash of border skirmishes. One moment lingers in the annals' faint echo. A raid on the eastern fringes when Ashurnasirpal was scarcely bearded, his father's forces shattering a tribal holdout. He watched as captives were bound, their pleas drowned in the victor's cheers. Not horror, but hunger stirred in him, then a taste for the symmetry of submission. Years later, another forge blow. A whispered plot in the palace cellars, courtiers eyeing the throne's edge. Tukulti-Ninurta crushed it quietly, but the scar ran deep. Paranoia? No. Precision. The boy learned that mercy was a leak in the dam, and Assyria's waters ran red enough without it. By his ascension, those lessons had tempered him. A king who saw not men, but ledgers. Rebels weren't foes to fell, they were debts to collect, with interest paid in flesh. The empire he inherited wasn't ironclad. Vassals in the west, Aramaean clans along the Euphrates, chafed under tribute quotas that stripped their granaries bare. To the north, Neri hill folk raided like summer storms, vanishing into crags before Assyrian spears could close. And in the east, the spark. Pether's revolt, a web of allied queens whose clans controlled the trade routes snaking through the Diyala valleys. These weren't warrior hordes, but shrewd networks, women who ruled through marriage pacts and merchant whispers, their holds fat with cedar from Lebanon and lapis from afar. Pethor, their shadowy anchor, had defied Tukulti-Ninurta's envoys, hoarding grain meant for Assyrian silos. When Ashurnasirpal's couriers arrived with demands, the response came in arrows, not acquiescence. The machine engaged. Armies mustered not for glory, but for guarantee. Secure the east, or watch the whole chain unravel. That spring, as the Tigris swelled with meltwater, the turning point came. Scouts returned from Pethor's frontier with tales of barricades rising, queens rallying their kin under moonlit oaths. Ashurnasirpal, pacing the throne dais in Ashur, paused mid-stride. His advisors murmured of diplomacy, gifts of bronze, promises of lighter tolls. He silenced them with a raised hand. "They hoard what is mine," he said, voice like gravel under chariot wheels. "Let them wear it." Orders flew. Legions from the core provinces, engineers with siege rams carved like battering gods. The paranoia crystallized not in rage, but resolve. This wasn't about one chieftain's slight. It was the ledger's first red entry. Crush it publicly, and the columns balanced for a generation. By summer's height, the host marched chariots, churning dust clouds that blotted the sun, footmen in scale armor, chanting to Ninurta, god of the hunt and the hurled spear. Pethor's queens, bold in their halls, didn't see the noose until it cinched, but that was only the wind-up. The true machine waited in Nimrud, where walls would whisper warnings eternal. The sun dips low over Nimrud's fresh-hewn battlements, painting the ziggurat's flanks in fire gold, as if the gods themselves approve the spectacle. You've marched with the army for weeks now, the air growing thicker with the scent of river reeds and roasting lamb from campfires that dot the plain like fallen stars. Kalhu Nimrud to the locals. The new capital rising from Shalmaneser I's ancient ruins sprawls before you, a miracle of mud and might. Ashurnasirpal's vision, walls 20 feet high, canals snaking like veins to feed hanging gardens heavy with imported figs and olives. Temples to Enlil and Ninurta pierce the sky, their bricks stamped with the king's name in eternal cuneiform. But tonight, the air carries no incense of celebration. It hums with dread, a low vibration underfoot from the tramp of bound captives herded through the western gate. 4,000 women, their silks torn to rags, faces streaked with the grime of forced marches from the Diyala hills. Not faceless chattel, these are queens, or were. Sarrat-Ninurta, among them, the named heart of the rebellion, a woman of 40 summers whose counsel once swayed clans from here to the Zagros. Her dark hair, once braided with lapis beads traded from the Indus, now matted with sweat and defiance. Before the chains, she was the weaver of alliances, daughter of a merchant lord, mother to 3 who wait in hidden holds, her days spent in cool courtyards, bargaining over bolts of Tyrian purple and casks of Babylonian wine. She laughed with her sister's queens over spiced dates, plotting not war but survival, diverting just enough grain to feed her people when Assyrian quotas left bellies hollow. Sarrat-Ninurta, whose name meant Queen of the Hunter God, believed in balances. Give the eagle its share, but keep the nest intact. Now, as guards prod her forward with spear butts, her eyes sharp as flint fix on the throne platform rising at the plaza's center, the crowd parts, nobles in fringed robes, priests with shaved heads gleaming under torchlight, soldiers still dust-caked from the road. The machine stage is set, oiled with fear. Tension coils like a bowstring, drawn too long. Ashurnasirpal emerges from the palace shadows, his diadem catching the dying light, a figure carved from the same unyielding alabaster as the reliefs he'll later command to boast of this. He doesn't shout. Kings like him never need to. A herald unrolls a scroll of hammered bronze, voice booming the indictment. Pethor's spawn, hoarders of the gods' due, defiers of the center's will. Murmurs ripple through the assembly, some nods of grim approval, others averted gazes, merchants calculating the cost to their ledgers. Sarrat-Ninurta is dragged to the fore, wrists bound in leather thongs that bite like promises. The demand comes not as plea, but proclamation. Swear fealty anew, reveal the hidden silos, yield your hilltop deeds to Assyrian scribes. In return, mercy. A villa in the capital, perhaps, weaving tapestries for the queen's court. Her laugh cuts the hush short, like shattering pottery. Fealty, she spits, voice carrying to the back ranks. You take our seed and call it gift. Our hills bleed for your walls. No, the plaza inhales. Ashurnasirpal's face doesn't twitch, but his fingers drum the hilt of his ceremonial dagger, a rhythm only his closest guard, Dayan Bel, the loyal blade from the core legions, recognizes as the toll of judgment. Dayan Bel, a veteran of 20 campaigns, his beard streaked gray from years under foreign suns, shifts uneasily. He's seen the king's precision before, the way he weighs a life like a merchant scales a coin. But this, 4,000 souls, not for the pyre in private, but the knife in plain view. Sarrat-Ninurta meets the king's stare, her chin lifted, whispering to the wind what her daughters might one day sing, endurance over erasure. The refusal hangs, a gauntlet thrown. The machine turns. The act unfolds not in frenzy, but in the slow grind of inevitability. Torches flare as dusk bleeds to night, casting shadows that dance like specters on the plaza stones. Guards fan out, their movements rehearsed as a harvest rite ropes uncoil, blades glint in the fire glow. Sarrat-Ninurta stands first, her stance unbowed even as thongs tighten. The knives descend, not wild, but methodical, tracing paths that claim without waste. No cries pierce the enforced silence. The crowd's breath is the only chorus. What follows blurs into the haze of implication, bodies bent to the breaking, violations whispered in the dark folds of the night, the king's claim public as the pillar it adorns. Dawn finds the structure complete, a monolith of stripped defiance, skins stretched taut like drumheads over forgotten songs. Sarrat-Ninurta's face, last among them, stares out from the apex, eyes sightless but unyielding. Word spreads not on wings, but on the feet of couriers who fan from Nimrud like ripples from a stone in the Tigris. Villages in the east hear first, a trader's hushed tale over barley beer, a priest's omen read in the pillar's shadow. Fear blooms, not as panic, but paralysis. Tribute wagons roll heavier now, envoys bow deeper. This wasn't about one woman's fire. It was the system's flex, a bureaucracy of blades, where governors reported flayings as neatly as grain yields, incentives carved in survival. Dayan Bel, overseeing the guards' rotation, pens his dispatch to the provinces. The machine hums true, no echo of revolt. Historians later puzzle over the tallies, 4,000, give or take 100. The annals boast without blush, but the true count lives in the silence that followed. One parallel whispers from our own ledgers. Modern regimes parading captured dignity on screens, not stone, to balance the books of control. The plaza empties under starlight, but the pillar stands, a silent sermon. Pay the debt or become the ink. But the machine didn't stutter in the east alone. Shift your gaze westward, to the Euphrates bends, where reeds whisper secrets to the wind. From a soldier's vantage, call him Arad Nabu, a conscript from the river flats. His hands calloused from oar and spear, the escalation unfolds like a fever dream. You've trudged the supply lines, Arad Nabu, dodging scorpion trails and the stink of camel dung, your kit heavy with the king's edicts. Crush, collect, convert. Nimrud's horror was the spark. Now it leaps the waters, igniting vassal holds from Arbela to the sea. Reports chain up the hierarchy. Provincial overseers to the chief eunuch in the palace. Tallies of skins shipped back as proof. Incentives gleam extra rations for the loyal blade. A plot of crown land for the scribe who logs it clean. Numbers cease to be cold. Whole clans vanish into the machine. Their queen's silks repurposed for royal banners. Villages hollowed like gourds left to dry. One moment etches sharp. A dawn patrol near Suru, where a lesser holdout, a widow queen named in no ledger, her face lined from years bartering peace with Aram's nomads, meets the host. No grand refusal, just a quiet horde of dates and dyes, hidden against famine. The soldiers, hearts steeled by Nimrud's echo, bind her kin. Sarrat-Ninurta watches from the ranks as the act repeats in microcosm. Implications in the tense flap, a pillar improvised from date palms. But here's the breather. The ironic puff of air in the grind, a jackal slinks from the reeds, snatching a fallen heel of bread, its yip absurd amid the hush. Laughter bubbles, brief as a bubble on the river, reminding even machines of the world's wry tilt. The widow's gaze, as they march her east, holds no plea, only pity for men who polish terror like a blade, dulling their own edges. Escalation spreads. Phoenician envoys, hearing whispers, send double tribute in cedar and glass, their harbors safe but their pride pricked. The machinery whirs on, gears greased by such yields, but Sarrat-Ninurta wonders, in the quiet watches, if the ledger ever balances the souls. 3 months later, the machine strains at its peak, the plaza in Nimrud swollen with witnesses from every province, the air a stew of sweat and smoldering braziers. Time slows here, each heartbeat a hammer on the anvil of empire. You've climbed the ziggurat steps, Dayan Bell, the gray-bearded guard whose loyalty earned him the overseer's post, your joints aching from the pillar's vigil. Below, the crowd mills like ants on a disturbed hill, thousands, drawn by decree, their faces a mosaic of awe and aversion. The king's innovation, not just punishment, but pedagogy. 4,000, the annals tally, but feel the scale in the press of bodies, the collective gasp as the final layers are affixed. Sensory assault peaks. The metallic reek sharpens with copper from fresh bronze. The low chant of priests invoking Asur's unblinking eye. The faint tremor of earth from chained feet shuffling in dread. The climax crests not in one stroke, but the symphony of them bodies arrayed in ranks, violations implied in the shadows of torchlit tents, the collective breaking a wave that crashes without splash. Ashurnasirpal circles the pillar, his voice a low thunder. See the cost of fracture. No gore in the telling. The horror hums in the hush after, the way light plays on taut surfaces like mocking silk. But the crack comes subtle, a hairline in the monolith, a murmur from the western fringes, a vassal lord slipping envoy gold to Sarrat-Ninurta's kin, whispering of overreach. The machine, in its zeal, has stretched too thin tribute flows. Yes, but loyalty frays at the edges. Sarrat-Ninurta's unblinking stare from the apex seems to mock it, her final breath a seed of doubt sown in the guard's uneasy glances. Dayan Bell feels it first, the weight of watching not just the fall, but the fracture in the faller. The pillar stands, but the empire's gears grind a fraction off true. Dawn breaks, and the assembly disperses, carrying the lesson home. But in that off note, the first whisper of entropy, Ashurnasirpal reigned another quarter century after the pillar's shadow lengthened, his son, Shalmaneser III, inheriting a throne unrocked by revolt. The king died in 859 BCE, not in battle's blaze but the quiet claim of age. His body laid in a diorite sarcophagus vast as a chariot, shipped to Ashur's sacred precincts. Sarrat-Ninurta's daughters? Scattered to the winds, some woven into palace harems, their songs silenced. Others fled to Aram's hidden wadis, seeding tales that outlived the machine. The rebel clans dissolved, their hill holds repopulated by loyal Assyrian stock, the Diyala routes now patrolled by tribute-hungry garrisons. Power shifted seamlessly. Shalmaneser doubled the armies, pushed to Karkar, where coalitions buckled, but the ledger's ink ran thinner overreach's toll in desertions and delayed wagons. Long-term, the empire swelled, a colossus astride the Near East, but irony coiled at its core. The pillar, meant to terrify into unity, became a blueprint for brutality that courtiers later mimicked to excess, hastening the cracks Shalmaneser couldn't seal. Nimrud thrived as capital, its canals feeding fields that fed legions, yet whispers persisted of queens' ghosts haunting the ziggurat stairs, a reminder that machines, however oiled, rust from within. Dust clings to your boots as you descend into the tell of Nimrud, the mound that swallowed Kalhu whole after the Medes torched it in 612 BCE. It's 1845, and Austen Henry Layard, British diplomat turned digger, his mustache dusted with the same earth that buried King Stumbles on the first slab. Not treasure hunter's gold, but alabaster truths. Wall panels from the Northwest Palace, etched with Ashurnasirpal's boasts. The banquet stele unearthed a century later, in 1951, by David Oates' team. Its cuneiform menu, a grotesque counterpoint to the pillar's menu of flesh. Layard, scribbling by lamplight, deciphers the annals. I flayed the chiefs, covered the pillar with their skins. No myth, the machine's blueprint, carved for eternity. Recent digs, like the Penn Nimrud Project's 2024 unearthing of Ninurta's shrines, yield cedar beams from Lebanon, exactly as the inscriptions promised, a tangible thread from that plaza to now. Oates' successors, sifting ash from the temple's fall, find Kuduru boundary stones etched with the same royal seal, proving the empire's reach wasn't bluster but ballast. Why does this echo? Not in the gore, but the gears, power's parade, where defiance is skinned for spectacle, much like regimes today broadcasting broken bodies to balance fear's books. It teaches that resistance isn't in the roar, but the remnant, the unblinking stare that outlasts the pillar. Human nature bends under the machine, but doesn't break clean. It splinters, seeding the next turn. Transcending Nimrud's dust, the truth stands universal. Empires fall not to swords, but to the weight of their own warnings. Return to that plaza. The pillar's gleam faded under moonrise. The crowd long melted into night. But now, the winds carry not screams, but silence, a vast, unbroken hush, where 4,000 voices once wove rebellion's thread. What changed? The machine ground on, but its echo hollowed the halls it built. Sarrat-Ninurta's gaze lingers in the stone, a fracture no chisel could seal. They were meant to vanish, erased in skin and shadow, their names unscribed from the clay. But they didn't, not fully. Fragments endure. In the annals' unflinching lines, the relief's stark lines, the cedar shards unearthed from temple ash. Dayan Bel's descendants, perhaps, whispered doubts in forgotten scrolls. Arad Nabu's kin carried the jackal's ironic yip across generations. And now they're here with you. Not as ghosts to haunt, but as gears to dismantle, because you chose to listen, to trace the ledger's red ink back to its source. In that choice, the machine stutters once more. If this tale of tallied terror stirred something in you, a question on the cost of control, or the queens who stared it down, drop it in the comments below. What echo does Nimrud leave in your world? Subscribe if you hunger for more unvarnished histories, where the past's machines meet our own. And remember, the story survives not in the pillar, but in the wind that scatters its dust.